Hi everyone, in this video we are going to be going over lesson 37 for our 7th grade Elevate groups. As always, we are going to start the first 4 minutes of class with students completing the sprint sheet and then 1 minute reviewing certain sets. I am always going to recommend going over the 4s, 6s, 7s, 8s, or 9s within that 1 minute because those are typically the sets that students struggle with. This lesson is on evaluating algebraic expressions. It breaks up the lesson into 2 parts. So the first part is translating verbal expressions into algebraic expressions. And then the second part is taking those algebraic expressions and applying them to real world scenarios. So first things first is we need to ensure that students have a good sense of all the terms that we will be using and how to apply them. Every mathematical phrase in words can be translated into an algebraic expression. Here we have 7 more than 5 times a number. So, in order to translate this mathematical phrase in words to an algebraic expression, we need to first identify the operations and the terms in the verbal expression. So we're going to break it down into parts. First, focusing on 7 more than. The word more is a mathematical buzzword that indicates we need to add. So 7 plus something. And then when we see 5 times, the word times is a mathematical buzzword that indicates we need to multiply. So 5 times something. The last piece, so we have focused on 7 more than 5 times. The last piece that we are missing is a number. So the last step tells us to choose a variable to represent the unknown number, letting n represent a number because n is the variable. So far, again, we have 7 plus and we have 5 times. We are going to show 5 times a number as 5 times n. Or we can show 5 times a number by just saying 5n. So this is how you would write the entire algebraic expression that matches with this mathematical phrase in words. So once you have gone over this intro, including the vocabulary words, you are going to jump into your teacher model, focusing on these specific steps that students can replicate during their independent practice. Taking up 2 minutes, you are going to translate this verbal expression into an algebraic expression. So it tells you to, number 1, identify the operations. 5 less than the quotient of a number and 3. The words less than mean to subtract 5 from the rest of the expression. Then number 2 tells you to identify the terms in the expression. Okay, well, the word quotient tells us that we need to divide by 3. And then step 3 tells you to rewrite the term with the unknown. Let n represent the unknown number. So the quotient of a number and 3 is written as n divided by 3. So if we were going to finally translate this verbal expression into an algebraic one, we will say 5 less than the quotient of a number and 3 is written as n divided by 3 minus 5. Students may choose to write it as a fraction, so they can write n over 3 minus 5. So now we are taking our knowledge of writing algebraic expressions and applying them to real world scenarios. Going into the teacher model here, we have Sarah, who has 8 fewer books than Jane. Write an expression for the number of books Sarah has. Step 1 is to choose a variable for the number of books Jane has. So it tells us to let J represent the number of books Jane has. In some of the later questions, it's not going to tell you the variable. Students will have to choose the variable. You can tell them to use the first letter of a name. So then it tells us to identify the operations that are being used. When it says Sarah has fewer is that mathematical buzzword that indicates an operation. Students should know that fewer indicates subtraction is happening. So 8 fewer means to subtract 8. So Sarah has J minus 8 books. Some students may be familiar in earlier grades on doing questions like this utilizing tape diagrams. So if we are talking about the number of books Sarah has and the number of books Jane has, we know that Jane has a certain number of books. We're not sure how many books she has. However, what we do know about Sarah is that she has fewer books than Jane. So we're going to go ahead and draw a tape diagram that is smaller than Jane's, right? And we know that there is an 8-book gap between these two ladies. So let's say that Jane has 10 books. If Sarah has 8 fewer than her, we would have to do 10 minus 8, which is the J for Jane's. We would have to do Jane's minus 8. So in this case, it would be 10 minus 8. And so that means Sarah would have 2 books. And then if Sarah had 15 books, we would have to subtract 8 to figure out how many books Sarah had. And so from there, we will release students to work on their independent time. If students are not really understanding the skill, you can definitely have them work on question B with you before releasing them to their independent practice time, which is translating verbal expressions to algebraic expressions and then moving on to those real world scenarios.